Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I am Gilles Gallant, and I am joined by NFL betting expert and futures analyst Brandon Anderson. And if you've been listening to the Action Network podcast over the last couple of weeks, we've been doing a lot of rankings, but we've been mostly doing rankings on the offensive side of the ball. But today, we got to go take a look at these defenses. Brandon is going to bring his defensive rankings. We're going to rank 1 through 32 all through the NFL. Now, Brandon, by the time we got to the end of our offensive side of the ball, we kind of got a pretty good idea of, what you value, what kind of criteria you're looking for on the offensive side of the ball. But the defense, it flips, right? Like, can you explain just a little bit more of the criteria and the traits that you look for when you're doing rankings of the NFL defenses?
Yeah, defense is tough, man. Defense is hard to figure out and tough to rank. It is a fool's errand trying to go 1 to 32 on these, but we're going to try anyways. Defense wins championships, right? That's the old saying. Well, last year, defense literally won the championship, and it got a couple other teams right near the top of the league as well. The question now is that the meta? Is that where the league is trending? Or was that a one-year blip? Is this still the quarterback's league, or is this more of a defensive thing now? So defense tends to be more reactive, right? Today's units that are really good, though, are proactive. What do I mean by that? You're coming out, you're attacking, you're bringing the game to the offense. You are dictating the way that the game is going to be played rather than typically and historically defense is kind of back on its heels, right? You're reacting to what is the offense coming? What's the package on the field? Is run pass? How do we play accordingly? So that's been a lot of the shift is defense is finally saying enough. Like I'm tired of this. We're doing things our way now. And you're going to see that with a lot of the defenses near the top. Another thing too, we used to see a lot of these guys, we call them like positionless, right? Or tweeners. And a decade ago, those were sort of guys we couldn't find a spot for. And now those are weapons, right? Those are your skill players on defense. Those are your Nick Emanwari for the Seahawks last year, the rookie that was so good for them. That's Kyle Hamilton. It's guys playing in the nickel, guys playing in spots off the edge or multiple positions also. And just, again, really dictating to the offense. Unlike offense, where quarterback is so heavily weighted, obviously, defense is a lot more even. I do prefer corners and edge rushers. It's still a passing league, so that's going to be top of the list. Linebackers become somewhat of the running back of the defense, where it's probably the least valuable, but not quite as far as running backs. And then the last thing, kind of alluded to already, defense is just really volatile. There's no quarterback to steady the things, right? So if quarterback is the heavily valued part of the offense, and we know who the great guys are each year or who the teams that don't have one, then that's going to stay sticky. It's going to stay consistent. We don't really have that defensively. And guys in a new scheme, guys playing through an injury, things can change a lot year by year. There's not one guy affecting quite as much. So it's tough. It's a tough exercise. This was definitely the hardest of all the rankings for me. Not at the top necessarily, but especially as we get on a list, and we'll get into that today.
Yeah, looking at tier 1, we're going to get into this now. It seems there is a little bit of stickiness to it. We're going to talk about this now. Let's start with tier 1. Just like last year at number 1, you have the Houston Texans as the top rated team. At number 2, you have the Seattle Seahawks coming off a Super Bowl championship and the Philadelphia Eagles at 3. So again, a lot of familiar names at the top. All 3 teams ranked in the top 6 for you last year, but let's start with the Texans. Number 1 for a second straight year. What did they do to be able to elevate themselves to be number 1 again in your rankings?
Yeah, defense not quite as sticky, except everyone kind of agrees this year on 4, probably 5 teams that are definitely near the top. And then we'll see what happens after that. Houston, certainly one of those teams. Top 3 DVOA, run and pass, each of the last 2 years, obviously overall then as well. D'Amico Ryan's pretty easy philosophy to figure out. He just says, our guys are better than yours. We're going to play harder. Come and get it. And the good thing about that is it's less volatile. It's less up and down and less vulnerable to big plays and that sort of thing. They're just going to have a lot of talent and come and get it. So Will Anderson, I think a very obvious defensive player of the year candidate there for them. Probably would have won last year if not for Myles Garrett's huge season. Next to him, Danielle Hunter and now Jadeveon Clowney as well once he gets back out there. So that's a top 3 edge group and top 3 corner group. Derek Stingley Jr. already mentioned. Kamari Lassiter, one of the fun young players in the league, really comes at you. Jalen Petrie. That group, if you're going to have top 3 corners and top 3 edge, and I already said that's the 2 most important positions, pretty easy number 1 after that.
All right, so then the Seahawks, because offensively, let's just call it what it is. You trash them on many different phases, especially like offensive line. But you're wearing a Seahawks shirt right now, and They just come off a Super Bowl championship. So talk to me about Seahawks Island.
Yeah, we've been on Seattle Island plenty of times the last couple of years. We had the Super Bowl ticket last year. Come on, Seattle fans, come on back. We like you. You were just waiting for the defensive teams here. And look, I know if I really, really wanted to win you back, I should have put you at number one. Why number two, not number one? Look, I prefer Mike McDonald. He is the number one defensive play caller, but I like him because he's aggressive. I like him because he's attacking. That does make it more volatile, though. Game to game and just over the course of a season, you're going to be more vulnerable on the downside. You're going to have the higher upside. And the higher upside just won the Super Bowl. You want upside in that side of things. But the talent here is not quite the level of Houston. That's not a diss. That is giving Mike McDonald the credit for elevating everything there. I do think it's maybe the best secondary in the league. Devin Witherspoon, and I already mentioned Nicky Manwari. Those are two absolute just weapons that McDonald's going to come at you, use them in all sorts of different ways. The defensive line, Leonard Williams is a star. DeMarcus Lawrence, he's getting up there in years, but does his thing. Byron Murphy, just body after body, rotating through, coming at you. Last year, they were the number one defense, run and pass. They were the top of the league. Last decade, the number one DVOA defense has finished top 10 the following season, 8 out of 10 years. Average finish, 7.5, median 5. So what does that tell me? Yeah, we know you're going to be good again, but it's really hard to be number one again. You usually fall off a little bit. I didn't have Seattle falling off that far. I just have them dropping a spot here. We're going to have a clear top 6 here. I have a tier of 3, then another tier of 3. Of those 6, this is my slightly least talented of the bunch, the pass rush in particular. They kind of have to create pass rush in the aggregate. But again, they're still a really talented bunch. They're still top 6 out of all the 32. And Mike McDonald just elevates everything above the rest.
Yeah, and it helps when you hit those picks that you got from the Denver Broncos in that Russell Wilson trade. Devon Witherspoon is one of the key players that I think of from that. Eagles, though, because I feel like we know what we're getting with the Eagles at this point, especially with Vic Fangio and the Eagles. But why do you have them the lowest of the 3? Because I could make the case that they could be 1.
Yeah, I think it's really tight between these 3 teams. And look, they were the team that was number 1 2 years ago. Then they dropped back to number 7 last year when no one would have expected that. That's that stat we just talked about in action there. The run defense fell off a little bit, but still a very easy top 3 pick here. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, we know how good they were as rookies. I had to be a little bit skeptical, but then they were just as good last year. Now you get Reek Woolen, speaking of Seahawks, coming over there. He's kind of the X Factor guy. I wonder if he could be a little bit kind of Trayvon Diggs as, he's going to give up a few plays at times, but maybe gamble and add in some upside here as well. The linebackers here is I kind of trash linebackers a bit already. Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell. They're just nobody who has a combo like that, a very unique pass coverage weapon for this team. So this is a top 5 linebacker group, top 5 corners, top 5 on the line. You add Jonathan Grenard. You got Jalix Hunt waiting to break out as a pass rusher. I do think, to your question of why bottom of these 3, they have the clearest weakness here, I think, which is safety. Andrew Makuba and Marcus Epps. It's a clear weakness of the position groups here. But look, it's Vic Fangio. He's going to fix that. He's going to solve the secondary, no problem whatsoever. And it's not quite as attacking. That's not Fangio's style, but that is a safer floor. I'm not sure they have the number 1 go do it all on your own upside like Seattle sort of had to do at times last year, but definitely top tier. And we know the Eagles are just as good as anyone else.
Yeah, and the one common theme I do find with these 3 teams is all 3 of them ranked top 10 in zone coverage rate per drop back last year. And what's funny is if you look at the defensive DVOAs to see where their weakness is, even though they didn't give up a ton of touchdowns on this front, all 3 bottom 10 against the tight end. So just something to consider heading into this season. All right, let's move to tier 2. This one's called All the Talent in the World. At number 4, you have the Baltimore Ravens. Number 5, the Los Angeles Rams. And number 6, the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll talk more about the Steelers here in a minute. Let's start with the Rams because, you're talking about edge rusher and corner. You've got Myles Garrett and Trent McDuffie. Arguably, Myles Garrett, I think, is the best pass rusher in the NFL. Trent McDuffie's probably a top 5 corner at this stage of his career. But again, you're having them in tier 2, so there has to be maybe some concerns attached to that team.
Yeah, just have them a slight nudge down from that top group. And I mentioned everyone's got their 4, maybe 5 defenses. This is the 4th. So they are number 4 of that top group. And look, frankly, I kind of thought I'd have them a little bit lower, but there's just so much talent on this team. They already had a lot of talent last year. They already were top 5 last year, DVOA. And now you add in those big names, Myles Garrett, Trent McDuffie, and Jalen Watson, also from the Chiefs, comes over. So here's why I'm at least a little bit skeptical. Myles Garrett, we know what, he just broke the sack record. We know how good Myles Garrett is, obviously, but he was really, really good as a Jim Schwartz attacking wide 9. Now he's a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's not done this sort of role. This is a different sort of look. The Rams have been a defense predicated on all this speed, guys. That's Jared Verse, where he's departed now. It's just sheer speed. Garrett's got speed, but not Jared Verse level speed, in my opinion. He's got a way more rounded game, power, finesse, all of that sort of thing. But does it fit the scheme here? And then McDuffie and Watson, those guys played for Spags. Those guys, to me, are already absolutely maxed out. They were awesome in Kansas City, but are they that awesome in a new system, in a different sort of look here? We see cornerbacks sometimes switch teams and have very, very different results. And not just slightly worse, but way worse. I'm not saying that will happen, but I think it's fair to have some skepticism about, you can't just take these names under elite defensive play callers who got them great production, put them in here. I'm still a little bit skeptical on Chris Shula. The results have been pretty good, but he's not Jim Schwartz. He's not Spagnuolo. So, and I think too, this defense is very top heavy, loaded across the board, everything but linebacker, which is the spot to be weak at. And then on top of it, we've said all of that. We might still add Aaron Donald to the mix here. We might just add the greatest defensive player in the last, 25 years. So, I kind of wanted to be out on the Rams. I thought they'd be out of my top couple tiers, but there's just so much talent, and they were already this high last year, even with my skepticism, even pre-Aaron Donald, to be clear. I'm not factoring him into the rankings. I still have this as a top 5 defense.
And the Rams could get a slight bump too in this ranking if Aaron Donald was to sign. So we'll see how that goes. And I think J.J. Watt would also have something to say about that top defensive player in the last 25 years. But
sure.
Either way, let's talk about the Ravens now, because this feels like a pretty huge bet on Jesse Minter and the personnel. I like the personnel. I like names every level, but it's starting to get a little old in the secondary. What do you like about the Ravens here at 4?
Yeah, I like almost everything. We'll get to the secondary. I agree that's the weak spot, but I think it's both. I think it's Jesse Minter and it's the personnel. Before last year, actually including last year, the Ravens have been a top 10 DVOA defense 8 of the last 10 years. So the only 2 misses have been both disaster injury years. Last year, no defensive line, right? They lost everybody up front. You could not stop the run early. They've had no pass rush. The bodies in the secondary, just whoever they can find out there. What they do, they collapsed to 17th. They were league average when everything went against them last year. The core and the franchise of this defense is so strong. Now, huge news for them is getting Nnamdi Madubuike back this year. He was an absolute star for them and missed all of last season. Now, next to him, Travis Jones, nose tackle. He broke out last year. Now you bring in Calais Campbell, who is in his 70th year in the league, and just add him into the mix. I think this is the best defensive line up front. And now you add Trey Hendrickson on top of all that. Finally, you get that 1-star edge rusher. And then on top of all that, you mentioned the secondary. The corners, don't love the corners. Nate Wiggins, especially Marlon Humphrey and Awuzie, those guys are definitely getting up there, like you said. If there's something goes wrong here, I think it is the corners. But if you need a solution, how about Kyle Hamilton? This defense, every year, gets somewhere in the middle of the season and is we're not really stopping the run that well. What if we just fill in the blank, Kyle Hamilton, and it's magically solved the next week? We're we can't really cover guys out of the slot. How about Kyle Hamilton? He can just do whatever they feel like. He's this heat-seeking missile and makes them the best safety group. And now Jesse Minter, who just unleashed Derwin James in this role, now he gets a better version in Kyle Hamilton. So I think it's the dream fit with Minter. I think Hamilton is the ultimate problem solver. I think this can be the number 1 defense this year. And I got really excited digging into this team and excited for the defense coming ahead.
Okay, well then, last thing with the AFC North, the Steelers near the top of the ranks again. You had them 2 last year. Mm-hmm. Now Mike Tomlin gone. Are you still comfortable running it back to having them up here in tier 2?
Yeah, it wasn't just Tomlin. And look, I've kind of talked about this a little bit. With respect to Mike Tomlin, that was a really great staff, but maybe not an elite staff. They were top 14 under Tomlin, 17 of 19 years. So just an incredible floor to year after 2 decades to always be an above average defense, but they were top 3 only 5 times. And I kind of always end up slightly too high on Steelers in these ranks each year because the talent is so high year after year. TJ Watt, you mentioned JJ. TJ is pretty good too. Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, a bit underused, elite pass rushing trio, even as they age up a little bit. Cameron Hayward, speaking of aging, decade and a half later, still maybe the best defensive lineman in the league. You get Derek Harmon year 2. Again, the corners here, you're a little bit older. They bring in Jamel Dean. I like him a lot. That hopefully lets Jalen Ramsey go back to the slot, where I think is the best spot for him this stage of his career. We need to get Joey Porter out there, but those three, Asante Samuel Jr., a lot of talent. And then the question mark, of course, is no Tomlin. That means Patrick Graham now. And at first I was like, man, how do you improve on Mike Tomlin when it's been so good? It's got to go down from there. But I do think this is a spot where Patrick Graham, he's quite proven. And look, we'll get to the Raiders much, much later in the rankings. That is not a talented group of players. And the Raiders were like a league average defense the last 2 years under Patrick Graham. He really has turned talent, non-talent, into a better than you expect defense. So can he crack the code on a ceiling here? We talked about Davis Webb with the Broncos offensively, where, okay, we knew what it used to be under the Sean Payton system. Is there a higher ceiling here, even if there's some unknown? I wonder if Patrick Graham could bring that higher ceiling and unlock even more what's already super talented, albeit older defense. I think the Steelers are going to be really good again.
All right, so those are your top 2 tiers that have 6 teams. When I read your article, though, there was a little bit of a gap here because, again, when you read the article, you'll see what I'm talking about, but you have tier 3 and you just left it blank. So is it because there's just a huge gap between 6 and 7? Like, tell me what happened here.
Yeah, it is a ginormous gap. I don't know I've ever seen this as I kind of prep for the season. So again, I keep mentioning this. Most people out there have 4 or 5 top defenses. We haven't got there yet. We haven't got to number 5. I know you're going to talk about this shortly. It's the Broncos. They're coming soon, I promise. But for me, it's that top 6 I had that we just did. And it is a cliff drop from there and kind of dart throws after that. The gap from 6 to 7 is the same in my rankings as the gap from 7 to 28. So that's how big it is. You got those 6 defenses. Now, look, that doesn't necessarily mean those are the top 6 defenses. Again, we're looking for how certain are we that this is a good defense or how certain is this a bad defense. Those 6, I'm just really confident should be a very, very good defense this year, somewhere in the top 10. And now after that, it's just like, man, if you think a team at 7 should be number 18 or you think number 23 should be top 10, it's not all that far apart. And so it's a lot of volatility to come. But it's those 6 and it's everybody else.
All right, well, let's move on from the novelty of the empty tier here. Let's go now to tier 4. And this is one where we're mostly focusing on play callers because it's a lot of names. At number 7, you have the New England Patriots. Number 8, the Kansas City Chiefs. Number 9, Denver Broncos. Number 10, Minnesota Vikings. Number 11, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, like I said, the familiar names, you've got Brian Flores, Vance Joseph, Spags with the Chiefs. But the Patriots, I don't think a lot of people are aware of who the defensive coordinator is with the Patriots. So tell us a little bit more about him and why you have the Patriots at 7th.
Yeah, Zach Kerr doesn't exactly fit in this group just yet until he proves he took over play calling mid last season and did a really nice job. Last year, if you watch the playoffs, obviously we all watched the playoffs last year, Drake May was not that great. He was not the reason that the Patriots made the Super Bowl. The defense really is what stepped up for New England. And this is a defense I was high on last year. They went out and added a bunch of names and just really added floor-raising talent. And then it wasn't that good early, but it wasn't healthy early. When they finally got healthy late in the season and into the playoffs is when they really hit their peak. And Kerr, I think, brought that out of them. So Patriots defense had been top 10 DVOA 4 out of 5 seasons. Then they fell all the way to 30th. Last year, they only got back up to 23rd. That's still bottom 10, but they were much better than that in the playoffs. And now you add in Kevin Byard at safety to maybe the best 1-2 corner duo, Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez. So I think they also have a case for best secondary in the NFL. And just a deep roster, lots of veterans, a lot of talent. The guys they added last year finally healthy together again. If I kind of take away the defensive play caller part of things, which again is the force multiplier, and just look only at sheer talent, this by talent alone is the best in my matrix on rosters outside of that top 6. The top 6 is top 6 talent and the right play caller. So that's why they're so far ahead. This is a talented roster. I'm not even really giving Zach Kerr that much credit yet. I have him slightly below average as far as defensive play caller. So if he really is that good, if he belongs in this group of names, then this defense could really take off this year.
The Broncos, though, man, the Broncos is the one team that we've talked about where I'm just not sure I can get down with them being at 9. I would have thought, I wasn't necessarily ready for you to have them in tier 1, but I thought they would have at least earned the respect to get into tier 2, especially when given all the names, Vance Joseph. So we'll talk about the Vikings and some other teams, but just talk to me a little bit about the Denver and why we can't include them in those top 2 tiers for you.
Yeah, they're the team that I just continue to find myself a bit skeptical on. Look, I was skeptical heading into last year. They finished top 5 again, second year in a row. So they should be winning me over at this point. This is into my top 10 from where I did not have them that high last year. But it's a few different parts. Vance Joseph, before these last 2 years, 8 years leading a defense, had never been even top 10 points per game, only once top 10 in yards per game. Also, run defense. He'd been 20th or worse 6 out of 8 years, suddenly top 3 the last 2 years. So that doesn't really pass the smell test as far as like normally those sort of, your profile of what you are can sort of stay the same from team after team. This has looked a lot different. Obviously, a very talented defense. And with Joseph, it's this very aggressive defense, which is going to expose your defense. And it really relies on your corners, a lot of man-to-man, and you just got to shut it down on the back end because you're going to wreak havoc on the front end. Does mean less turnovers usually, which can kind of cut down your upside as far as huge plays. But we come to the corners then. I've always been the guy that is not quite as high in the media as Pat Surtain as everyone else. Jaquan McMillan was really good last year, stepped it up next to Riley Moss, who I know is kind of the punching bag because, somebody has to get thrown at, and you're not throwing at Surtain. And then Jahdae Barron, we kind of forget about him. He was the round 1 pick last year, so he steps up as well. Nick Bonito, another guy I'm just not quite as high on as everyone else. Electric pass rusher, but nothing else. Like, it's just that. There's no run stoppability. There's no set the edge. It's just pin your ears back and come after the quarterback, and it works pretty well, but more of an incomplete player, and Denver is starting to lose a few bodies up front now. Jonathan Cooper, not even sure if he's going to necessarily be out there. And we lost Franklin Myers and some of the other names there. So it's just a defense that, again, I still have in the top 10 here, as opposed to 5th. They're at 10th or, in this rating here. But they are a big fall, though. It's not just a slight drop. I'll own it. I talked about the huge tier drop. I have them higher in my dart throw section, but they're still not in that top group for me.
Yeah, and that's probably the only quibble that I have is just that I thought that they could be included in that top group. As far as what you laid out for them, I do agree on that front. Now, the Vikings, though, because the Vikings, I feel like the defensive coordinator elevates the sum of its parts. I feel like some of those pieces aren't necessarily as talented, but the schemes that Brian Flores is throwing at these offenses, I feel like makes it almost impossible not to include them in the top 10.
Yeah, that's basically where I ended up at and why they snuck in here. And look, it's very similar type defenses here in that you have this aggressive attacking defense, but that can sometimes go really sideways if the talent is not there. And I'm not positive the talent is there with the Vikings. Again, if I take away the defensive play caller, just go talent, the Vikings end up bottom 10 defensively on talent alone. So this is a big bet on Flores to say, okay, you're a bottom 10 talent defense, but I'm putting you top 10 in the rankings. That's how good Brian Flores is. But we lost a lot of names here. No Jonathan Grenard, Javon Hargrave, and Jonathan Allen. They were not good up front, but that's a lot of names to replace up front. Obviously, Danielle Hunter, not so long ago as well. You need now Dallas Turner, the big pass rusher. He's got to do the thing. He hasn't been that great yet. You need James Pierre, who had pretty good metrics last year, to maybe be your top corner this year. That's a big step up for him. You need Caleb Banks, the first-round pick, to show up and play game after game. I think this team ends up still as above-average defense here, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get some sort of ugly games where it did not go well. The really good offense exposed this defense a little bit, but they're going to really hammer some bad quarterbacks. They're going to really hurt some bad offenses, and that's going to make the numbers look pretty good in the end of the day. But I think it could be a bit more up and down than it has been in recent years.
Okay, so Kansas City then, because they did lose their top 2 corners. They did end up drafting a corner in the first round of Mansour Delane, and they did bring back L'Jarius Sneed. But even Chris Jones, as effective as he is, he's starting to get a little long in the tooth as well. Outside of like Spags, I feel like that's probably the big thing that you're looking at right now, what you love about Kansas City Chiefs defense.
Yeah, just no real weakness here. Pass rush has never been a huge strength, but I like they go out and add in Peter Woods and Thomas the first 2 rounds, so the defensive line gets a little better. And we talked about Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson missing. Obviously, they're over with the Rams now. Spags has always been a really good developing corners, and they go out and add a few names here. They trade up, big trade up for Mansour Delane. I have to assume he's got to be the right fit if they're going that hard to get him. And they bring back L'Jarius Sneed for dirt cheap because he was horrendous last year leaving them. But that's the thing with corners is we know how good he is in this system for Spags and have to believe a little bit there. And already last year, Noel Williams, I think he's one of the next breakout guys for this defense. Round 3 a year ago looked really good. I think he steps right into that Jalen Watson, even maybe Trent McDuffie type role. So it's Spags, man. Look, last 4 years, you're going to average defense twice, you're 7th or 8th twice, and it always gets better into the playoffs. So this is just a bet on like, well, I don't really know who the next great defenses are. So if I have to pick some teams, let me just pick some of these coordinators that I know are going to give me results here.
All right. Now, Tampa, you'd think that I thought you were trolling me here by putting them at 11. I actually agreed here with this ranking because the reason why is because again, different from a value standpoint, if you can make an offense completely have to shift their entire game plan, that player becomes much more elevated. And somebody like Vita Vea, who they just signed to an extension, I think is the best at doing that. And when you have somebody like that, it's very difficult for me to downgrade your defense. Make the case for Tampa Bay at top 11 here because you had them at 20th last year, and they didn't really add a ton of names here year over year in the offseason.
Yeah, it's just a relatively safe floor. You know with Todd Bowles what you're getting as like the 10th or 12th best play caller still. Not a great head coach, but he's going to give you pretty good defense. Vita Vea, like you said, you just don't even – it's like a no-fly zone. You're not even going to try to run at Vita Vea. That's how dominant it is, and this has always been a great run defense. I don't love the corner depth. So the pass defense is going to get picked on, especially if you can't run anyway. So it's hard to get to a huge ceiling here. I think to get to the ceiling, it's got to be Ruben Bain, right? This team has sort of outsourced pass rushing for years, and now they finally got a chance to draft a star, keep them right at home in Florida there. So Todd Bowles last 4 years, 13th to 18th in DVOA. So basically right at league average. This is me saying, okay, if that's the floor, what if you get a little bit more talent in here? And what if the offense plays a little better, can you set your defense up a little bit? And so I just sort of see everything slightly ticking up for Tampa this year.
Okay, so that was your tier 4, where we trusting the play callers rather, on the defensive side of the ball. Let's move to tier 5. You have a group of 4 teams, and you've titled this tier Better Than You Thought. And number 12, you have the Detroit Lions. Number 13, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 14, the New Orleans Saints. And number 15, the Chicago Bears. And I find this to be a very interesting group because you have 2 NFC North teams in here, the Lions and Chicago. And the Lions just have been dealing with injuries on defense for a couple seasons now, whereas the Bears really elevated their defense last year, but a lot of it was noisy, a lot of it turnover based. What are we looking at from these teams' secondaries? Is that a weakness point for you for these 2 teams?
Yeah, I think the injuries are the big story with both these teams. So the Lions, it's Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. That's the best safety duo in the league, but we don't know when we're going to see either one of those guys. So for now, that's a big hole on the team, even though some of the backups did fill in nicely. But there's still a lot else to like there. Aiden Hutchinson, rising star. Aleem McNeil, a big just space eater back on the line all season. He missed a lot of last year. And when Branch and Joseph are back, that I think pushes this into a top 10 defense here, even pushes them ahead of the Patriots as the most talented defense outside of that top 6. Even with all the injuries, they still finished 9th in DVOA last year. They've still finished top 13 3 years in a row, even though they keep having a ton of injuries. So they're just starting to win me over with the talent. Now with the Bears, I was high on them last year. I had them 7th, and it did not work out for me. They did get a lot of turnovers, like you said, but the core defense itself was not so good. We know about the turnover regression, so I think everyone's projecting them as a huge drop now. I think the injury regression or progression should be better here. Dennis Allen's defense really needs top corner play. He did not get it last year. He had me and you playing corner last year. Jalen Johnson is back. Kyler Gordon is back. Dylan Thieneman, the safety of first round, he's going to help out the secondary. I think much more talent there, and I still trust Dennis Allen. It's a wide variance here, but this is middle of the pack. And if you are a top 5 offense, middle of the pack is going to be just enough for you.
Yeah, the Bears have a ton of names on defense too, like Montez Sweat, Grady Jarrett, Devin Bush. And, if you can have Jalen Johnson for a full season, maybe we might be able to see what kind of things happen here for this defense. Now, in your article that's going to be published on actionnetwork.com here sometime within the next 24 hours, but you wrote about how the Jaguars and Saints, despite being in different conferences, just have some similar traits. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, to me, the big similarity is we know how those teams kind of leapt forward. Obviously, less the Saints and the Jaguars, but we give a lot of credit to the offense. I actually think it was the defense that deserved the real credit for the rise. So, Jacksonville last year, big leap in talent and production. Safety Antonio Johnson, I thought was a huge breakout player. Devin Lloyd, he's a big miss now. He moves on from the team, but I thought Anthony Campanelli did a great job last year. He's been especially good with linebackers, so I don't think they're going to have a huge time replacing Lloyd. It is a bit of a red flag, though. This is another turnover team where they had a huge swing in turnovers. They were second in the league in interceptions last year. And along with it, they jumped from 31st to 6th in DVOA. This huge leap forward, maybe too far of a leap, right? Like maybe a little bit outkicking your coverage as far as what your players are. And so I think a little bit back toward the pack here, kind of middle of the rankings here. But this is a defense that's more the sum of their parts. More good than great, though, maybe. The Saints, they made a big leap late in the year under Brandon Staley. They finished 13th in DVOA, especially good against the run. Now you add in a nose tackle in the second round, get some older guys, Cam Jordan, Chase Young, and Demario Davis is gone now. Caden Ellis, that's a drop off there. But I like Justin Reed, Julian Blackmon at safety, just a lot of talent there. And I think kind of quietly became this very solid, stable defense. We don't maybe notice it as much. Kellen Moore goes high tempo offense. So maybe they're going to still give up some points. But the offense is going to put up some points also, and you're just playing more snaps out there. But the defense, the metrics have been really good for the team.
Football season is here, folks, and if you don't already have the Action Network app, now is the time. Plus, to get the most out of the app, you'll want to be an Action Pro subscriber. It's only with Action Pro you get real-time pick alerts from myself, Brandon, the entire Action Network team of experts. You can access pro projections powered by Sean Kerner and our predictive analytics team, and a ton of other benefits. And right now, Action Network podcast listeners can save $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro, use code POD20. That's actionnetwork.com/pro, use code POD20 for $20 off the annual price of Action Pro. All right, let's move to tier 6. This is the change we can believe in. At number 16, right in the middle, you have the Dallas Cowboys, followed by the New York Giants at 17, and the New York Jets. Considering where we had, or where they finished rather, at the end of the year, I believe last in defensive DVOA, the fact that you have the Cowboys at 16, I'm feeling pretty encouraged. What do you say about the Cowboys here?
Yeah, I think you should be encouraged. This is a defense I'm really excited about. I almost want to be more excited than I am at this ranking. Christian Parker, the new defensive play caller, everyone is excited for him. Comes over from the Fangio tree, great with defensive backs. But it's not just him, it's talent too. Quinnen Williams, people forget, they don't get him last year, and that defense rose a lot late in the season. Quinnen Williams is still a superstar on the line, so he's there. Now you add in veterans, Rashawn Gary, D. Winters, Von Miller, Jalen Thompson at safety, I think, is going to step up with a scheme change here. And then the other safety, Caleb Downs. Is he a safety? Is he a nickel back? Whatever he is, I think it is not a mistake that Christian Parker gets hired and they go out. They got this team's Derwin James. They got this team's Nick Emanwari. This is the guy that's going to play in the slot, play over the field, and attack on this defense. DeMarvion Overshown, I think he's going to step forward now that he's healthy again at linebacker. Deron Bland has had some really high seasons and a better system. He steps up too. And it's not just Christian Parker. It's also not Matt Eberflus. And that is a pretty huge swing from one play caller to the next. So don't forget, you wouldn't forget, Jill, this was a top 5 defense 3 years in a row, 2021 to 2023. That's a bit ago now, and these are a lot of different names, but this has a lot of potential here. It's more talent than you think. And again, like the Bears, if you're a top 5 offense, even just getting to middle of the pack gets you right in range, enough to go game by game, enough to really make a push into the playoffs.
Yeah, anything better than Eberflus at this point, where you're having him as your defensive coordinator. I'm sure that contributed to the increase in ranking. Sticking with the NFC East, I wanted to talk about the Giants because when you look at the defensive line and linebacker core, it looks a little scary for opposing quarterbacks. It looks like they're going to be able to get after it. And then the Jets, they made some slight improvements as well. Demario Davis, you mentioned, he's now on that team. Minkah Fitzpatrick in the secondary. Are those the main reasons to be excited about these defenses, or are there other things we should be considering?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Abdul Carter was awesome last year. Did not get the huge sack numbers, but huge on pressures. A lot of the underlying metrics really thought he had a great season. Plus Brian Burns, plus Kayvon Thibodeau. So you got this great pass rushing trio. lose Dexter Lawrence, but he wasn't that great last year. And this was the worst run defense in the league. So what do? They go out and add DJ Reader. They get Shelby Harris, guys who are going to be able to stop the run, stop the bleeding there a little bit. You go and draft Arvell Reese and Colton Hood. You bring in Tremaine Edmonds. Just a lot of floor-raising guys here where I don't think this is going to be a great defense, but I think it fits the system better under Denard Wilson. I was not a big fan of Shane Bowen. Kind of bleed passing with this personnel is just not the way to go. I think this is a more balanced effort this year. And then the Jets. I don't know, man. Like the Jets are in bottom 5, a lot of the rankings I see out there. Yep. And here they are, middle of the pack, which is a pretty huge step forward. But I think people are focusing on the names missing. Quinnen Williams, not there. Sauce Gardner, Quincy Williams, not there anymore. But you said the names that are there now. Demario Davis, Minka Fitzpatrick, David Onyemata, Devondre Sweat, I think at nose tackle is really good. You get round 1, top 5, I think, edge rusher, David Bailey, to a team that has not had any pass rush. So a lot of talent coming in. And another name that I've talked about being skeptical about, Aaron Glenn, going back to calling the plays this year. He had those pretty good results with Detroit. He really maximized talent there. He calls calling defensive plays his superpower. Well, let's see if it happens, because most people have this bottom 5. If this is a league average defense, even that alone makes the Jets an over, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I mean, you had the Jets in bottom 5 from a coaching staff standpoint. So if they got rid of Aaron Glenn and replaced him with another coach, this ranking you might even see it increase for the Jets at this point. The Action Network podcast is teamed up with DraftKings, and we've got some great news. Football season is almost here, and something big is coming to DraftKings Sports. Get ready for DraftKings Game Day on September 2nd, where we'll be celebrating the return of football with exciting offers and game day deals all day. DraftKings Sports app is now available in all 50 states, bringing the excitement straight to your fingertips wherever you are, from Florida to Texas to California. You'll never miss a beat. Sweat all the games you love in a seamless experience, no matter where you're watching, with one app. Download the DraftKings Sports app now and use code Action Network so you're ready when the action kicks off. DraftKings, the crown is yours. All right, let's move to tier 7. You've called this one. A lot has to go right. And the first team in this tier, it clearly makes sense why this tier is called this, is the San Francisco 49ers. At number 20, you have the Los Angeles Chargers. And number 21, first time not in the bottom 5 of anything, the Tennessee Titans. But let's start with the 49ers, who are obviously getting back, arguably the best middle linebacker in the NFL in Fred Warner. Nick Bosa can be a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL. But like you said, a lot has to go right. Is it just like another injury concern? Because, I mean, there's injury concerns from the coaching staff all the way to both sides of the ball at this point.
It's true. It's almost like 2 on the nose from the script writers that Kyle Shanahan is even hurt now on top of everything else. But like you said, Fred Warner, probably one of the top middle linebackers. No, probably about it. Fred Warner is a Hall of Fame, the best there is. And him back and Bosa back, who, look, I'm not a fan of Nick Bosa, the player or the person, if we're being honest, but he's a game wrecker when he's out there. He's not out there enough. He gets hurt like every season for a few games. But those 2 guys are so good that just having those guys back and healthy changes the entire trajectory of the defense. But you need them back and healthy. I feel pretty good about Warner. He doesn't have a huge history. Bosa less so, because we don't really know what year to year he's going to give. But Chris Kokorek, defensive line coach, legendary guy, always gets the best out of the line. Outside of those 2, Kokorek's got his work cut out. The rest, Raheem Morris, the coordinator, he's got his work cut out, because to me, looking at contenders, this is easily the worst secondary in any contender. And we just got young guys across the roster here that kind of all stunk last year, for being honest. Like, it just not go well. And what happens now in year 2? Can we get some step forward there? And can we keep Warner and Bosa on the field? I'm skeptical. So for once, I'm actually taking my skepticism into account and put the Niners below league average here. But certainly the talent is there. It's got to be a Warner and Bosa.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, out of all the rankings we've done, I think this is the only one where you don't have them in the top 10 for something, right? So let's talk about the Chargers, because when we did all of our offensive ranks, I'm just going to call it what it is. You glaze them pretty hard. Like, you're pretty high on the coach, the coordinators, quarterback. I thought the defense was probably the only thing that was working for them last year. So the fact that you have them at 20, I kind of feel like is an insult.
Yeah, look, it's an insult, maybe, but maybe it's respect to Jesse Minter because Jesse Minter being gone is the flip side of Mike McDaniel being there now offensively. So it was a top 10 defense the last 2 years. But if we, I keep talking about the non coordinator talent, this was a team that would have ranked toward the bottom on just talent last couple of years. They often did get exposed against real defenses or against real offenses because the talent wasn't quite there. They just outperformed their talent most of the season. That was Jesse Minter. Now, look, I like Chris O'Leary in theory. O'Leary in theory, that's kind of fun. The new defensive coordinator, he is a Minter guy, but he's not Minter. You still need the guy, right? So it's sort of like the island of misfit toys here. And I just need to see, like, Derwin James, he's going to fit anywhere. But can Chris O'Leary do what Minter did and get the talent to outperform? I have to be skeptical until we actually see it. So that's where I'm at with the Chargers. And then you mentioned the Titans. Robert Saleh, obviously, we know that he's pretty good defensively. Jeffrey Simmons was awesome last year. Like, for all the things that went wrong in Tennessee, Jeffrey Simmons was maybe like a defensive player of the year type candidate. Now you bring in John Franklin Myers, 5 new starters, I think, from free agency. So just a floor raising group, not a defense I'm super excited about because Gus Bradley is still going to be involved there. But this defense was 17th and 19th the 3 years before last year. I think it cratered and now bounces back right around to that range.
Yeah, the Salah bump makes sense because that is what his focus is on. We'll see how it goes year over year, but I mean, it can only get better. I mean, from what we saw last year as well, outside of Jeffrey Simmons. All right, let's move to tier 8. You've called this one bad news for some contenders because all 4 of these teams in this group are looking at playoff potential here. And at number 22, you have the Indianapolis Colts. At number 23, the Green Bay Packers. Number 24, the Buffalo Bills. And number 25, the Cincinnati Bengals. If you're a fan of any of these teams, you obviously are not thrilled that they're this low. But I want to start with Buffalo because, wow, like what a fall from grace. I mean, I think you had them, from what my memory is, you had them just outside the top 10 last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, normally I'm pretty high on Buffalo, at least relatively, because Sean McDermott has been such a floor raiser. A different sort of coach, obviously, than Jesse Minter, but a guy who has always maximized the talent. This has not been the most talented roster. By talent alone, this is a bottom 7 defense for me. So how much can the new guy, Jim Leonhard, raise the floor of the defense? I don't know, man, because that was McDermott's thing. That's what he was doing already. I know last year, I noted in my comments about them, the upside of the defense was guys like Joey Bosa, Matt Milano, Daquan Jones. Those were the swing factors. They're all gone now. Look, they did not raise the ceiling for this team. But where is the ceiling? Where is it coming from? Jim Leonhard doesn't get to actually play. He's still got to use the talent that's out there. And I'm not even sure that there is an above average position unit on this defense here. Maybe pass rusher if Bradley Chubb hits next to Greg Rousseau. But we talk about a step back before the step forward. I think people are maybe in over their head thinking this is the step forward spot. We might be at the step back spot, man. Like, I think we need to actually bring in some talent here. And I think this could be a bit of a transitional year, and it could be rocky at times for Buffalo.
Well, and the downside with the Bills, year over year, it seems to be that it was the defense that let them down. And the ranking, I think, reflects that now at this point. The Packers, I feel like they need to have an asterisk by their ranking, just given where we don't know if Micah Parsons, like, I'm pretty sure he's going to start on the PUP list, but let's just assume that he's not on the roster at this point. Is that how you're factoring in that ranking here with them at 23?
Yeah, I'm kind of splitting the difference here. I'm assuming maybe like half a season. So this is, to me, is a bottom 5 defense without Micah, and then probably like a league average defense with him. So I sort of end up somewhere in the middle here, like the safeties, Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams. Lucas Van Ness finally had a pretty good year last year, but all those guys are going to obviously play better when you put the defender that I think personally is the best in the league back out there in Micah Parsons. Everything else gets easier when you have him up front doing all this stuff. So it's like an incomplete grade. We need to see them come back later. But again, we talked about this with Green Bay. Got to be a little cautious early in the season until we see Parsons back out there.
Okay, I'm going to tie this together, Indy and the Colts, because Lou Anarumo is the moved over to go with Indy after being with the Bengals here. So what makes Indy stand atop of this group of the 4?
Yeah, Colts to me is just a high floor. They've been 14th to 20th DVOA 4 years in a row here. Relatively safe. Not a defense I'm super excited about, but they probably don't tumble too far. Sauce Gardner and Trevarius Ward haven't actually played together yet, so we need to see what that looks like. It should be very good. Latu on the rise there. And then the Bengals, they go out and get Dexter Lawrence. They add Boye Mafe, Jonathan Allen. They add safety Brian Cook, who was awesome last year. They added some guys in the draft as well. But man, did they need to add them because their defense was so bad last year. I like Al Golden coming over from Notre Dame, but they were rough. And don't forget, you add all those names, you lost Trey Hendrickson to do all that as well. So this is a step forward for Cincinnati. 25th would be a positive outcome. Cincinnati fans would love to get that more like 20th or 18th, but let's start in the right direction and go from there.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are just hoping to be league average at this point, and that might actually make them a little bit of a contender. But the teams that aren't going to be contenders are the next, 6 to 8 teams that we have left here, and we won't spend too much time on them, but it's a big group of just trash. At 26 in Tier 9, you have the Browns, 27 the Commanders, 28 the Cardinals, 28-9 the Panthers, 30th the Falcons, and 31st the Raiders. Wow. Okay, so it's getting real ugly here. We've got new play callers for the Browns, Commanders, and Raiders. Let's just start there then. Like, what makes them such a downgrade of where they're ranking now, given new offensive play call or defensive play callers?
Yeah, I'm most excited about Durante Jones and Washington among these 3 new play callers. He's a former Vikings defensive backs guy that sort of sets up, hopefully, in the Flores, Zimmer, aggressive type thing. But we talked about that at the top. If you have the aggressive mindset, but don't have the bodies for it, that might not go well. And I think that's the Washington version this year, unless you get like Rasul Douglas, Amik Robertson, these veteran corners. If they can bounce back under the D-backs coach, maybe it goes well. Sonny Styles, the rookie, everyone's high on him. Can he break out? You're still replacing Bobby Wagner. I think it could be very ugly at times because the talent is just not super there. Speaking of ugly, the Browns lose Myles Garrett. So how far can you drop from Myles Garrett on to Myles Garrett off? And we know that, but I think underrated is losing Jim Schwartz too. Mike Rutenberg, kind of a very much unknown defensive coordinator from the Robert Saleh, Gus Bradley tree. We know I'm not going to love that necessarily. You get Jared Verse in for Myles Garrett. He's looked great in camp. You add Quincy Williams. There is talent here. I will note the Browns are at the top of this group. So Browns and Titans fans, finally, we did it. We got you out of the very, very cellar here. But look, it's a long way down losing Myles Garrett for sure. And then last one, the Raiders. Max Crosby, apparently still on the roster. We traded him and didn't trade him and had that whole thing. We forget about that in the offseason. Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean, the new linebackers, not my favorite. Like putting those guys together especially, not my best. We talked about Patrick Graham earlier. He's gone now. He elevated this group. There is not a lot of talent on this team. And I think, again, Rob Leonard, the defensive play caller, these are just names we don't know much about. So you have to be skeptical about new names, don't know much, not a lot of talent there.
I'm going to group the final 3 teams here, Arizona, Atlanta, and Carolina together. What's the easiest way that you could say that you're leaving them all for dead?
Yeah, I think it's just it's names you're watching for. The whole product is probably not going to be great, but in Arizona, Walter Nolan on the line. I like him. He's a good young player. Will Johnson, Garrett Williams, young corners. But you're cherry picking names, right? You're picking 3 guys and like, well, there's 8 more guys got to play out the defense. What else is there? Carolina, Derek Brown, he's a stud. Mike Jackson, good corner. They signed Jalen Phillips. They signed Devin Lloyd. I'm not in love with those guys, but should be good. Kind of very Panthers-y. Just very like, yeah, you're 25th best or something. Like, you're not the worst, but you're pretty close to it. I kind of wish you'd make up your mind. Falcons, for them, it's injuries. Last year, round 1, they go get Jalen Walker and James Pierce, both the edge rushers. Walker's out for the season. James Pierce is suspended half the season. So hard to overcome that. This defense has been built around their speed off the edge, and they don't have it anymore. So safeties, Jesse Bates and Xavier Watts, I love that too, but just not a lot else there with those teams near the bottom.
Okay, and to no surprise, the Miami Dolphins, last place, probably going to have last place finish. They're first in the odds to be worst team in the NFL. How much more of a downgrade is this on defense compared to their offense? Because it's not like we had them in top 10 in offense either.
We didn't, but I actually think this is the single worst Miami rating. Out of all the Miami ratings we've been down on, like, remember I talked about the top 6, how far of a gap they had from everyone else? Miami is almost the similar gap at the bottom from even 31. As much as we just dumped on those last group of 6, this is that far down. It's the worst secondary in the league. Safety, I think, is maybe the worst positional group of any of the groups in the league. They're starting at least 3, maybe 5 rookies on this team. Jeff Hafley, I don't know why you did this, but enjoy the ride over there because it's going to be a tough one.
All right, let's now go back to the top because I want to talk about the top 10 again, some takeaways that we can use going into the NFL season. So at your top 10, you have the Texans at number one, Seahawks 2, Eagles 3, Ravens and Rams to round out your top 5. Then you have the Steelers, Patriots, Chiefs, Broncos, and Vikings making up your top 10 of NFL defensive rankings. I'm going to stick with the conference here, AFC, because 6 of the top 9 teams are coming out of the AFC. Do you find that from an AFC standpoint, NFC standpoint, like the AFC kind of dominates more from a defensive standpoint than they do offensively? Because I usually look at the quarterbacks from an AFC standpoint.
Yeah, it surprised me. It's not really super tilted, but it does tilt toward the AFC. There's at least one top 10 of my defenses in every division as well. And of those 6 teams you mentioned, 4 of the 6 made the playoffs. The other 2 had Mahomes and Lamar miss time with injuries. So just a lot of high floor defense there in the AFC more than the NFC.
Okay, so the other thing too is how many teams overlap. Like how many teams are in your top 10 in both offense and defense? Like for example, the Rams, you have them top 5 in both offense and defense. But the only other 2 teams that you have like that are in the top 10 in both of those categories, the Ravens and Chiefs, again, from the AFC, but they both missed the playoffs last year. So give me some encouraging news about why we should feel good about them, because when we watched them last year, it was not encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the narrative right now is you keep hearing it everywhere. The wide open AFC, the wide open AFC. It's the Wild West out there. And I don't know, man. Like, are we sure it wasn't a one-year blip where the wide open AFC had all these injuries and the 2 superstar quarterbacks got injured, and that's what happened last year? Like, I think that there's not much skepticism on the Bills. We'll talk about that in a second here, but I think the Ravens and Chiefs bounce right back into the top of the mix. The Patriots, they just missed the cut. They're 11th in offense. Otherwise, they'd be top 10 in both. And so they might also be in the mix there. But that is not so wide open. If you have these juggernaut teams with top 10 offense and defense out there, just got to mention here, over in the NFC, if you go like top 13, the Vikings and the Buccaneers both might sneak in here as just like, all right, a lot of paths for things to possibly be good there. And I know we joked all these rankings about squeezing the Bucs in. I had to do it one more time here, but not so far off. That's a pretty good group of teams for the Vikings and Bucs to be part of there.
So the 3 teams then I think about, because you have them top rated defenses, but we trash them from an offensive standpoint. I'm thinking the Texans, the Seahawks, the Eagles. What do we do when we have 3 teams that really lead from a defensive standpoint? Like, do you feel like there's a cap on their ceiling of how much noise they could truly make to go to a Super Bowl? Because, I mean, we just watched the Seahawks do it. Could the Texans and Eagles potentially do it as well? Because the Eagles, again, another team, won a Super Bowl in recent years like that.
Yeah, exactly my notes here. The Seahawks just won the Super Bowl defense first. The Eagles honestly did it the year before, but both those teams did have a top 10 offense or fringe top 10 where elite defense can lift your offense. You force turnovers, you put them in good field position, you're setting them up to succeed a little bit better. So that can help. But look, that's the case with these 3, Seahawks, Texans, and Eagles. We had them all at offense 16th or lower. So league average or worse for those 3. So we're going to have to see it. You have these 3 juggernaut defenses, but none of them paired with an elite offense. The Rams are the closest one there. What about some other teams? How about the Steelers, where they end up top 6? We talked about how much average did we say offensively for them, but what if you're average plus an elite defense? Could that be good? How about the Saints? How about one of those New York teams, the Giants or the Jets? A little further down the rankings, but if they get better, if they're like a top 10 defense and take a further leap, not a lot of offense there, but could one of those teams step up? So I think you maybe find some sleepers there. Sometimes those deeper sleepers, those tend to be the teams you immediately turn around and bet against round 1. But it's all right. You can still make some money in the meantime.
Leave it to you to somehow shoehorn in the Steelers again. Like with this, I just cannot get on board with that one, but we'll see how it goes. I asked about this when we did the offensive podcast about these divisional clusters that you have in your rankings, because I think there could be some opportunity that leads itself to maybe even an actionable bet here. Like Broncos and Chiefs just inside the top 10, AFC West. Then like the NFC North, you kind of have them all clustered like 10 through 15. Like, what is an opportunity that we would take advantage of with those divisions?
Yeah, I think opportunity is the word there. When things are clustered, it means opportunity. It means long shots can step up. Remember, defense is unpredictable. So it might mean that maybe it's just the offense that stands out here. But AFC West, you've got Denver a slight step back offensively. Chargers a slight step back defensively. The Chiefs are the only one that is up on both of those two. So maybe that's the balance you're looking for. NFC North, you said 10 to 15, but not the Packers, Packers, especially early. So to me, that might be the takeaway is like, man, if everything like that was a group we said was clustered offensively too, everyone's top 15 offense, top 15 defense, except for the Packers defense in a division that's going to be close. That might be really bad for Green Bay.
Well, but then the Green Bay part, like you have them like, let me just double check. Okay, tier 7, which is in that 22 to 25 range with the Colts, Bills, and Bengals. Is it the Packers that you'd be most worried of those 4? Is it the Bills? Which one?
Yeah, look, I think the Colts are just happy to be included there among the contenders, supposedly. We know the Bengals are going to be bad. They just need to be a little better to be in the mix. The Packers, at least early, are going to have to be worried, but they do get Micah Parsons. You have to believe at some point. To me, the big one is the Bills. Just a huge red flag, bottom 10 defense for me. And we already talked about not the best receivers, maybe a slight dip offensive line, unproven coaching staff. We didn't get to do the top 32 special team rankings, but here's a spoiler. I had Buffalo bottom 5 special teams also. This actually comes out for me, even as my number 2 offense, even as important as offense is, bottom half of the league. This is the sort of red flags I saw last year with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I didn't pull the trigger. But could this year the Buffalo Bills maybe miss the playoffs?
Oh my God. Okay. We're going to save that for another pod because that's going to be a bombshell if they don't make the playoffs here. All right. Before we get out of here, it's time for our segment presented by DraftKings. Brandon, we talked about team defenses here for the last hour. So give us a play you like to go along with what we've discussed today.
Yeah, let's keep it very simple all the way back to the top. The Houston Texans had the number 1 defense, number 1 last year, number 1 again this year in the rankings. We talked about Jacksonville falling off, Indy falling off a little bit. So number 1 defense in the AFC South, pretty easy choice. You can take the Texans to win the division. Seems like the easy option here.
Okay. All right. Texans to win the division, AFC South. And for all the Houston Texan fans listening in the Lone Star State, if you want to join Brandon here for the Texans to win the division, remember the DraftKings Sports app is now available in all 50 states. So go download it today. Don't forget that DraftKings Game Day is coming up on September 2nd, where you'll find some amazing offers, whether you're in Texas, California, Florida, or any state. So that'll do it for today's episode of the Action Network podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to leave us that 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast, and download the free award-winning Action Network app. You can save $20 off of an annual pro account by using code POD20 at actionnetwork.com/pro. So for Brandon Anderson, I'm Gilles Gallant. Thank you again for listening to the Action Network podcast. Bonne chance.